Just as you're coming up, there's a comment by Chris Simone that says, "It's hump day. Let's do this." Yes, Dave. Let's get in there. Let's get it going. I've been waiting.
Yes. My fault. I was sitting on my patio drinking coffee, reading, and I realized, oh, I better check the time, and it was 7 o'clock. Whoa!
So, can I slap you?
Yes, virtually yes.
There you go. Boom, boom, boom.
Like it's not a real slap.
Yeah.
You don't want to do anything to this beautiful thing here I call my face.
Beautiful. Well, let's ask the ladies, shall we?
Yeah. Right after I pay them to say so.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to go out and pay them to say not so.
Yeah, they're gonna make a lot of money today.
Okay, here's a quick question for you. I don't know whether you managed to follow up on this. Last week, Bernie Sanders was putting in a demand to actually make the Senate not support arms for Israel. Did he succeed in that?
No, he didn't. He brought up a bill that says that the United States is abusing or is in conflict with its own laws and those laws of international law by supplying Israel bombs of destruction and or other munitions, where he and other senators have come up and said, yes, we agree with the fact that Israel had a right to defend itself, but it has from the very beginning waged war on all the people of Palestine, not just Hamas. And we know this is true because in the very beginning they said they're going to shut off water, food, electricity, and all other things. And they have done basically that. Plus the fact that of their indiscriminate bombing, I guess 60, I don't know, 60, 2/3 of all buildings in Gaza have been destroyed or damaged. 87% of living spaces have been destroyed. That's houses and apartments, that kind of thing. The same amount of hospitals and schools and universities have all been destroyed. He is saying this is a war on the people of Palestine, not Hamas. And by taking the statements of those people in Netanyahu's war cabinet, it seems to be exactly that. The statements by which they have said that they were going to starve them out, they were going to make life miserable for them, seems to be exactly what is happening. And he is saying it's contrary to U.S. law to do that. They have strict rules that they cannot supply somebody with weapons who will do such things. And that has been going on for a long time. In fact, it even motivated a very weak government like Biden's to write a letter. Blinken and whatever the guy's name is, the defense guy, they both wrote a letter saying, well, you got to improve things. You got to get more food in there. You got to get more medical supplies and water into Israel because people are starving, particularly in the north. And they, according to all the aid agencies that are working in Gaza right now, this has come up very, very short. There has to be over 300 trucks, a minimum of over 300 trucks go in there every day. This is not happening. Yeah. And the U.S. supplied provisions, some of which will go bad after time. They're time sensitive, have been held up at the borders, and the Israelis just keep saying, "Oh yeah, well we're doing this and we're doing that," but the results are nothing's really happening. And the United States went weak on them after the 30 days. They said they would stop sending weapons if they hadn't complied with this in 30 days. And they said, "Oh well, we've done enough to comply. They've done enough of our demands," which According to the Israelis, they're just fine and everything's just great, and all those starving people, I don't know where they came from, and and the U.S. being extremely weak on this situation. Netanyahu knows he just all he has to do is ignore them and throw them a few bones once in a while. Oh yeah, we opened up a few more border areas and trucks, and what they're saying is nonsense. Meanwhile, those people working in Gaza have called this a disaster, and even people who normally don't speak publicly about these things, who are in charge of food supplies or whatever, have come right out and said, you are starving these people. And the U.S. keeps doing the three monkey thing: see nothing, hear nothing, speak nothing. And they continue to give massive amounts of bombs and weapons to Israel to keep doing this, the indiscriminate bombings. And this is collective punishment. When you go to war against there's supposed to be 40,000 Hamas fighters maybe, and allied Islamic groups there that are insurgents of one kind or another, or what you might call terrorists. And then you've killed over 43,000 people, probably much more than that, because the ability of
estimates at least 100,000 by international groups now, possibly even more than that.
There are over 100,000 injured minimum, over 100,000 injured. 60% of them were non-combat combatants. I think 60% of them were children or something of that kind, and they don't have enough medical stuff to help them. And at the same time, they're trying to feed them with no food. And so you have children that are being wounded in these bombings, and they're not being able to get medical treatment. They're losing arms, eyes, legs. This is a disaster of incredible proportion. It is ungodly. These people who, if you want to put it that way, these people have no God. They view Palestinians as children of a lesser God, and it's all right to do anything they want. And Gallant, who was a very, very, very harsh taskmaster himself, couldn't take it any longer. He was the defense minister, and he said that we've done enough. We've done way more than we need. And Netanyahu fired him. It prevented him from going to the United States to talk. The Americans are just I don't know, just slaves to Netanyahu. Whatever he says, they get.
Yeah,
they have not been able to. They have not been able to function as human beings. When they talk to the Palestinians, Gallant is the one that called the Palestinians human animals, and even he, as harsh as that is, even he has had enough of the devastation, and he wants a peace deal, but not Netanyahu. Also, the United States has no control over the West Bank. What's happening there? They just keep eating up more and more territory, and the settlers are attacking Palestinians, burning, chopping down their olive trees, destroying their farm fields. It is the right-wing government of Netanyahu is extremely harsh. He has Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who want to colonize the West Bank and Gaza. They want to eliminate the Palestinians. They have tried to force them out, and they still try to force them out. I think Netanyahu will keep doing what he's doing until the Palestinians or the world has no choice but to take the Palestinians somewhere to like Egypt, where they can be rehabilitated.
Yeah.
And the Israelis have prevented any outside journalism in there. There's a demand for journalists to go in there and to witness for themselves. The only thing they have now is a handful of journalists in there feeding out details of what's happening. And the Israelis are loath to have. In fact, they've even taken Al Jazeera and prevented them from even reporting in Israel. So they are censoring the stuff as best they can, but still news is coming out, and still the United States is the one holdout really that are weak. Almost every other European nation has now started to limit and put warnings on Israel, and yet the United States is just jelly-backed on this, has no spine at all.
Yeah.
And they will go down in history as a participant, and that's what Sanders has said, that they are a direct participant in this, because they will not enforce their own laws about what Israel is doing.
And that's why one of the things why will Israel be the world war or Ukraine?
Well, if they both explode, like if Putin starts dropping nuclear bombs, which he's threatened to do, and Turkey now is getting very, very much more and more irritated every day. Hamas has moved its negotiating team from Doha to Turkey because I don't think they think they're safe in Doha. And if this thing and if Iran explodes, it starts firing missiles back into Israel, this will exacerbate things even more. It could just tumble into a massive war. Right now, it's extremely expensive for the United States too. The United States cannot deal with its debt. It pays, I don't know, 15% of all its revenue to pay for interest on the money it's borrowed, and now it's in a situation where it's borrowing money to pay the interest on its debts. So the United States is in a very, very difficult situation.
Oh yeah, and that's of course why part of the reason why Sanders raised that question.
Yeah, and so you're putting the American people, who are 2/3 of the American people are against what's happening in Gaza, and yet you're taking their tax dollars and giving them to Netanyahu so he can slaughter some more innocents.
Yeah.
Seriously, that's not it. And the plans they have for Gaza are harsh. They're going to cut it up. They're talking about settling it. Trump himself is, I don't know where and why no one has any human feelings for the Palestinians at all. Now Hamas has done this terrible thing and started this war. They've pretty well killed every Hamas major operative. Even Hezbollah's major operatives are all gone, and yet they still continue to slaughter people. If they have one suspected soldier in a building, they'll destroy the whole building and everybody in it just to get at him. And so much for the surgical strikes.
Yeah.
And the fact that they are resisting, and then they know that by not bringing in food, water, and medical supplies, this will put an incredible strain on. It will punish the Palestinian people, and they have no intention of not doing that. They'll show a little bit of lip service. They'll open up. They'll get one or two trucks in there and see what we're doing. But then as soon as somebody turns around and says, "Oh, so the Blinken,"
but one or two trucks isn't 300.
Yeah, I cannot understand why the United States is so weak on this. And we've mentioned that the Israeli lobby is a big issue here. That almost every one of the senators and congressmen are afraid of the Israeli lobby because they are very, very effective. They can really marshal a lot of resources against any senator or any congressman and force them out of Congress by campaigning hardly against them with a lot of negative ads. So right now you have the United States with its client state Israel with roles reversed. The client state of Israel is the one that views the United States as the client state of Israel.
Yeah.
And Biden and his administration is going along with that because of the fear of the Israeli lobby. I mean, it's nuts. And
It
what
is.
Bernie
It is.
Sanders has done here, and remember, Bernie Sanders is a Jew.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I
He's
know.
a Jewish guy, right? And of course he has sympathy with the Jewish people. Of course he does, because he's a Jew. And yet he is the real Lion of Judah here. You've heard the expression, the Lion of Judah. Well, he's the real Lion of Judah because he's the one that's got a backbone to face up against the Israeli lobby. He's the guy that's got the strength of character to tell the U.S. the truth. But they are uninterested in the truth. They have turned a blind eye and a deaf ear to the massive suffering of Palestinian civilians. They are okay with the Palestinians being children of a lesser God, which is sickening to me. And we will go down in history as the Western nations will go down in history as weak and spineless and and bereft of moral sinew, in my view.
Yeah. All right. Let's basically, okay. So good morning, Karen, and good morning everybody who's come on. There's been quite a few comments there, which I'm not going to regurgitate. I want to move on to the main elements of our show today. So, human smuggler was issued a new passport, Canadian passport. So, this guy was he's a Sri Lankan who basically smuggled Sri Lankan people into Ontario recently, or in 2021. He was convicted and part of the thing is he had to surrender his travel documents as part of a court imposed release conditions, and then he applied for a new passport in 2023. The RCMP arrested him and found a new passport at his Montreal home.
This guy's been on the radar since 2008.
Yeah.
He's been involved in smuggling and that kind of thing since I think the article says he first came on the radar in 2008. So he's known to the police, known to the immigration people, but he still is functioning. And what he did, they put an ankle bracelet on him and took away his passport, and all he did is apply for a new passport and got one. How does that happen?
Yeah,
you've got a criminal.
Absolutely.
You've got a criminal that has done these things, and yet all he does is go back into the system and get himself a new passport. He was arrested for having two different Canadian passports in different names, and yet they still gave him one. Where's the screening process? I mean, the RCMP and the border immigration people must be pulling their hair out. Like they're trying to come down on these guys.
Yeah, because you kind of wonder what's going to happen. What's going to happen with him? You know, well, he's in prison right now, but basically, as soon as he gets out, does that mean he's got another Canadian passport already and waiting for him?
Yeah. Well, here he says in 2008, he was sentenced to 52. Why is this guy even a Canadian? Why didn't they throw him back? He says, the news learned that Russia sentenced to 52 days in jail after he was convicted in 2008 for possessing two Canadian passports that weren't in his name when he landed in Toronto's Pearson Airport. So he lands at Pearson Airport in 2017. Investigators in Quebec charged Russia in connection with human trafficking event at the port entry of Dundee, Quebec. He pleaded
and he was responsible.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was responsible for. He was arrested in Kingston, and he was responsible for some deaths where a boat turned over on the St. Lawrence.
Yeah, he was thought to be part of that.
Yeah,
He was caught red-handed smuggling in a Sri Lankan, and yet this guy has been at it since 2008. He gets a brand new passport in 2023 after his was taken. Where is the screening process?
yeah,
Where
yeah.
we've mentioned this before over and over, that the government is not functioning well in the ordinary day-to-day workings of the government.
Well, and
When a guy like this has had so many criminal charges on him, and he's already been arrested for having two passports that weren't even in his own name. How did he get them in the first place?
yeah,
Right. And
oh yeah,
then with all these factors that should have flagged him to immigration, they issue him a brand new passport.
yeah. And really, heads need to roll over this.
Oh God, yeah.
And I mean government heads need to roll over this, because we need to figure out who the hell was responsible for allowing this to happen. And honestly, both bureaucrats and the heads of their departments in the political world need to be shaken up. This is just ridiculous that this even happens.
Oh, it's incompetence, massive incompetence. We are already facing a refugee crisis.
Yeah,
We one of the main issues in our government is the amount of refugees and the surplus of even legal immigrants and legal students that come into the country legally. That's even too much, and yet you can't even come down on an obvious criminal like this who manages to get a brand new passport with all the things that are against them. They caught him bringing a Sri Lankan into the country. Well, somebody brought a Sri Lankan refugee into the country, and that Sri Lankan refugee, or who wanted to be a refugee, was smuggled in from the United States. He had a wife in Malaysia, and he said to the investigating officers at the time that Russia had promised them he didn't have enough. He would charge them $7,000 for the trip across the border. The guy didn't have the money, and Russia says, "Don't worry about it. I'll get you a job, and you can pay me back a little at a time." But what we hear quite often is about these illegals that come into the country, and then they are vulnerable to people like Russia, because then they start to use them as slave labor,
yeah, oh
get
yeah,
them to work in places undocumented, and they never ever pay their bills because they make sure that they never have enough to pay. So they work and work and work and pay and never make a whole lot of money. And so they sell their labor to people who want cheap labor, and they work as undocumented people, and they're constantly in fear of the smuggler, because the smuggler can say, "You just keep working for me, or I'm gonna
yeah,
point
oh
you
yeah,
out to the authorities."
yeah. And exactly, and that actually causes even more issues in our society. And of course, people like him get to be rich, likely millionaires or billionaires, while the people who work for them, live in atrocious conditions and probably 25 or 30 to a house.
I'm wondering why this guy's in Canada in the first place. If he
Yeah,
landed in Toronto with two Canadian passports, first of all, he got two Canadian passports in different names. How did that happen? Why did that happen? What
yeah,
is wrong with the Canadian immigrant passport office that they can allow such a simple thing to get away from them? The same
yeah,
person with two. He had his own passport at the same time though. He has one with his own name on it, and two other Canadian passports with different names.
Yeah. It's all very well if you had two Canadian passports with your children or your family on it, but this isn't the case. This is, two independent passports that he clearly doesn't have a right to hold.
No, that's fraud, and that's almost like treason.
Yeah.
So
and
then they go
relevant.
soft on the guy. Then they go soft on the guy, and he continues. Like that was in 2008. He was arrested with two.
Well,
so why is he even in the country? Why didn't they expel him?
And then the question is, why didn't they expel him? Yeah. Because typically, they've expelled people for way less.
Yeah, seriously. I got a talking to in the Toronto airport. I have my document, right, and the baggage stickers. What was common in Southeast Asia, they would take the baggage sticker and put it on your passport so you wouldn't lose it, so you could claim your luggage, because that was a common thing. People would lose that little sticker, that comes off your baggage. So they would stick it on your passport so you wouldn't lose it. So I had about 3 or 4 of those on the back of my passport, and there was a lady there in the airport, and she said, "Oh, you shouldn't do this. This is a government document." She gives me a dressing down for that. And meanwhile, I don't know how many people in that airport had false passports, and she couldn't spot one of them, could she?
Oh, I get it that you weren't doing the right thing, but again, I always peel them off the passport because I don't like them on the passport, and I put them on my tickets, which is where every other ticketing person puts them.
I know. I thought it was really convenient, and that was the thing they did in Southeast Asia. And
I get it.
I don't see anything wrong with it myself. It was on the back of the passport, not the front,
and it wasn't intruding.
No,
I get it. I get it.
So, and it was a convenience for me. So there you go. I get this talking to that I shouldn't be doing that. Meanwhile, it wasn't me who did it, and this was a government document, and it was important, and you shouldn't do that to a document. Well, tell me, how many of those government documents have you given to people like this guy, Rashia?
Yeah.
3 passports, 1 his own and 2 fake ones. How's that happen?
And then you give him a brand new one.
Priorities are quite wrong here, lady. Like, don't tell me that. Try to find a false passport.
Yeah. All right. I think we can move on from that. There's 4 Niagara politicians who've written to Doug Ford in a province-wide letter against the use of the notwithstanding clause. This has also come from 41 Ontario councillors who signed a letter across the province. So who are the four local politicians, Dave?
Well, we know it's Lori Lococo for sure. Right?
Yeah. Well, basically, because Lori
had misgivings about the whole thing, and I don't blame her, particularly when she spoke that we haven't given enough resources for those people who are already working with the homeless, the drug addicted, and the mental health and economic victims of or homeless. And now what you want to do is get very harsh and draconian on them, and you think that's going to make a difference when you don't add any more resources. You still have to have those exact same amount of resources. So she feels that it's a slippery slope. Basically, you start taking people's rights away, and what happens thereafter?
Yeah. Well, according to CBC, according to CBC, those 41 councillors, clearly coming from 23 different communities across the province, including Niagara Falls, St. Catharines, St. Thomas, Guelph, Chatham, Kent, and Cambridge, and other places, London as well. There's all manners of reporting. And as you quite rightly point out, it's obvious that one of the letter writers from Niagara Falls is likely to be Laurie Lococo.
It is here. It says St. Catharines City Councilor Greg Miller, Caleb Ratzlaff, and Niagara Falls City Councilor Laurie Lococo, and St. Catharines Regional Councilor Haley Bateman are among the 50 municipal councilors and mayors across Ontario who signed a letter with concerns about the use of the notwithstanding clause. As individual councilors in our respective municipalities, we know that Ontario municipalities are facing humanitarian crisis that is affecting all of us, said the letter from the coalition that posted the media. We see it every day in our communities, but no municipality should be above the law, and we are sworn to uphold democracy and human rights as councilors. Well, bravo. And I think if there was no other path forward, maybe something like this would be inevitable. But as Laurie pointed out, and I don't think anybody listened to her, that the resources were not there. The resources to treat the mentally ill, the drug addicted, as we pointed out, if somebody wants to get treatment for drug addiction, they phone. What you should have is immediate response. You want to get off drugs? Okay, come along. We'll put you in this hospital room. We'll make sure that your withdrawal systems are as easy as possible on you. We'll give you counseling and all that. No, what they get is, come again some other time. We're too loaded up. That's the same as the mental health stuff too. If anybody's ever familiar with the mental health in and around Niagara Falls, you cannot get counseling. You have mental health issues, and your family or your friends tell you to go to the hospital or go to a doctor. And what do they say? No room for you. We could fit you in maybe a couple of months from now. That's the kind of thing. So the resources were never there. So how are you supposed to interrupt the homeless momentum when you do not have the resources to deal with it? If we had, perhaps we wouldn't have had the homeless situation we do now have.
Yeah. Exactly. And part of resource availability has been what's at the center of all this. And I think that's where people like Laurie have been talking. Okay, so
in the end, if you now use the notwithstanding clause, you're going to have the exact amount of resources that you don't have now. You're going to have the resources that the people who are already working with these people have been asking for. You're going to have to provide them one way or another, using the notwithstanding clause or not.
Yeah. Betty is saying, my stepson found him dead. We tried to get him to hospital. They wouldn't listen to the dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a typical story.
Yeah.
Typical story. I've had a few experiences with the mental health thing here in Niagara. It was pathetic. They once you're in there, even once the person does get into the psych ward for treatment, there really isn't much treatment. They just keep them as calm as they can, and then they let them out after 72 hours. And if they find a reason to keep them, then they try to get through the treatment as fast as possible. One of the problems, of course, is everyone in there has the right to leave when they want after the 72 hours. And that's a problem because their treatment can't continue that way. So there are issues, and I don't know how they'll address them, but they just say, well, that's the way it is. That's the way it is. And
Yeah.
in the meantime, the homeless people are becoming more and more egregious in the way in which they behave.
Yeah.
Because of
Absolutely.
their mental health issues and their drug addiction issues, they don't act like the human beings they should be. They act in terrible ways, like defecating and abusing this or that because they can, and um, so that is a thing that like it's like it's a catch 22, or you know, if you help them, they abuse the system. If you feed them, they've got more money for drugs. If they that kind of thing. So how do you interrupt that process? And I don't know how you can interrupt that process by incarceration. Is that what they want to do, which is extremely expensive? Do they want to pack up
I'm
everybody?
not convinced that's any more of a solution than, it's not a solution.
If they could, like I said, yeah, like basically, if they can guarantee results, if they said that they could make people well again by doing this, or as many as possible become well again, then yeah, you have a convincing argument. But all you do now is say that we have to react, and we're going to act sternly and draconianly, and we're going to knock down their tent cities, and we're going to put them someplace else. Where are you going to put them?
Yeah.
They want to get them away from schools and residential areas. Well,
It
basically, you're going to
essentially
set up.
what you're going to do is you're going to set up. I think what they're going to end up doing is setting up out of town, out of sight, encampments with
Shanty towns. Shanty.
shanty towns, encampment shanty towns. The idea being out of sight, out of mind, and use police enforcement to ensure those people don't come into town. I think that's what's going to end up happening.
Yes. And are these people going to be better off? The whole one of the thrusts of the notwithstanding clause is if we have these powers, we can force people into treatment. Well, that really works, doesn't it?
Yeah. And Peter Biker's saying hard to rely on chemistry to heal a sickened mind.
Yes, it is. It's a mind that's not working well. Because people don't behave like that ordinarily. So there's mental health issues and drug issues. There's also the economic issues. I know a guy that's on and off homeless. I meet him all the time, or every once in a while, not all the time, but every once in a while I come across him. He doesn't smoke. He doesn't drink. He's one of the smartest guys I've ever met.
Yeah.
He's super well informed about everything. And yet he can't, just because he's just an unusual person, he can't sustain a job or whatever. He can't seem to make a life for himself. He's just an unusual, eccentric person. And yet he doesn't have those things. His whole reason for being the way he is his homeless status. I mean, that's his economic status. So we fail to remember that there's a certain amount of people that are there because of economic reasons, and that is growing all the time. First, you lose your apartment, then you live in your car. When your car becomes unfixable, then you end up in a tent.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Any other? Okay. So, yes, today's society, if they can't find that, they will look for something else. And YouTube has all the ingredients. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So moving on, Niagara is to mark a transgender remembrance with a library event and vigil. So basically, they have got an event today. Niagara Transgender Action Coalition will host an event at the St. Catherine's Public Library branch from 5 till 6:30 p.m. today. And after that, they will hold a vigil at the St. George's Anglican Church on Church Street at 7 p.m.
Yeah, I think this is brought on basically by the Trump administration getting elected. They have found a lot of sort of negative ads portraying transgender people. And in fact, one of them is very, very effective. The most effective ad the Trump campaign had was one that stated the policies of the Democrats in helping, among others, prisoners get transgender treatments and operations and stuff in jail. And the commercial, or the campaign commercial, said, "The Democrats are for they and them. We are for you." That was one of the most effective commercials that is being reported for the Republicans as painting the Democrats as they them sort of benefactors of some kind. I'm not so sure that the transgender people are any worse off now than before. I think that the transgender community has to be protected, of course, because they're citizens of Canada. All the other things, though, having operations and puberty blockers on children that are 8, 9, 10 years old, that kind of thing, that's a whole different issue. But I think probably things like that are what is spilling over to the sort of the rhetoric that is headed towards transgender people. There's a lot of misunderstanding with transgender people, and I think if we were educated a little bit more, we wouldn't have so much of a resistance to them. And I'm not so sure that she talks about violence towards gender people, and violent, like rhetoric that is negative rhetoric. And so she's afraid that things are going to get worse. I'm not so sure they're going to get worse. I think that it's one of those things that sort of comes and goes like that. You have extremists among the transgenders who think you should start putting puberty blockers into somebody that's 8 years old that says they might want to be a girl or a boy. I think generally speaking, everyone thinks that that's not good and that's not healthy. But if you say that, you are transgender phobic. I think everyone has concerns like that. If you take a child and start putting puberty blockers in them and start their transition before they are an adult, things like transgender women competing in Olympics on the same playing field as non-transgender women gives them an incredible advantage, as we've seen many times so far in competitions around the world. So it is an issue that will sort of have to shake itself out somewhere along the line. And I think it takes a lot of thought and consideration, because immediately in a lot of events, they were allowed transgender women to compete against cis women, they call them, or women that were born female, or people who are born female and identify as women all along. That and then they had to have second thoughts because of the extraordinary performance of people who were previously men. And things like that is irksome to the average person. We feel the unfairness of that kind of thing. And then so we blame the transgender community maybe, or look badly towards the transgender community. But I think these things have to be sorted out. And this particular vigil denotes violence against transgender people, and it says the annual event was founded in 1999 when Gwyneth and Smith, to remember two transgender women, Chanel Pickett and Rita Hester, who were murdered in 1995 and 1998, respectively. I don't know why they were murdered. Who murdered them? Obviously, not an ordinary everyday citizen would do that. It would have to be a nutcase to go around murdering people like that.
Yeah.
To be annoyed at a transgender person or something like that through ignorance is one thing, but to actually murder them, yeah, they could be at risk, and we don't want them to be at risk. They're a human being, so we don't want them to be at risk. But on the other hand, people's frustrations are exacerbated by government institutes that will take a transgender woman and put her in a swimming contest with other women and insist that transgender women change in the same change room as cis women, which makes them vulnerable and puts them at odds. Women's spaces, particularly, like if you have a transgender man, no man's going to be feel vulnerable if that person comes into their change room. They might not like it, but they're not going to feel vulnerable and unease. But if you take a transgender woman, and put them into a woman's change room, they're going to feel vulnerable, and it's not going to be a comfortable situation for them. And then you have people like AOC who will talk about women as menstruating persons. They're not women anymore. They're menstruating persons and non-menstruating persons. This is the thing that drives people crazy, and we want women to be protected and not feel vulnerable. And I think that is part of the annoyance, if you want, or even the violence that is directed towards transgender women, particularly, not so much transgender men.
All right. Further, moving on to another local story. Niagara Regional Police have targeted St. Catharines shoplifters and arrested more than 50 people now.
Finally.
Yeah. But again, I'm going to ask about this, and I'm going to be a bit cynical. What's going to happen? They arrest them, they put them in the system, and 3 hours later, they let them go.
That's exactly what I thought too. I thought good, but guess what? They're just going to process them, put them right back on the street, and they'll be right back into Costco or Walmart or wherever else they steal.
Yeah.
In our society, one of the pressing issues is the massive increase of shoplifting.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons it used to be if a shoplifter was caught, the police came, they took him away. But the police can't be. The police have a whole lot more other issues to deal with, and that's way down their list. Well, the police have tried to correct that by having this special operation where they have police very close by. They set up an operation where the police are close by, so when store security identifies a person as a shoplifter, they can actually have police there quickly to arrest the person as soon as they leave the store. So those people will then be arrested and incarcerated for a brief amount of time. At least they're arrested. But as you said, what happens to them thereafter? I mean, if one day in this operation they got 50 shoplifters, that was probably a fraction of the shoplifters in the stores.
Yeah, absolutely. And and that's not to actually knock the police or the security people for not finding other shoplifters. They're probably working as hard as they can in doing that. But the problem that I still face is that, okay, so I've heard of young. When I was a kid, I heard of young people who were caught shoplifting. And what ended up happening is they spent the night in jail. They spent the night in the police cells, and they would then be released after a massive lecture. If the parents didn't give the lecture, then it would be the police officers that would give the lecture in front of the parents about how they should behave before they were let go. Before they'd finally face charges, a few months later.
Yeah, I knew guys that did shoplifting, but it's usually short term. They did it for a little bit of excitement,
Yeah.
and they don't continue to do it. They do it once in a while, or once every once in a while. If they needed an album they couldn't afford, they'd sneak it in. There's other guys I knew that did it on a regular basis. They would have, but they were real professionals. They would go in and they would distract a store owner by asking him questions, and the other guy would be going around stealing stuff when the shop owner couldn't observe that.
Yeah.
I remember the most egregious. I remember a guy going in to Radio Shack, two guys going into Radio Shack, and I knew there were ne'er-do-wells. I knew that both of them were ne'er-do-wells. So the guy goes, "So I watched this go on." I happened to be in the store at the same time, and then left it, and then just stayed outside to see what was going to happen. So the guys went in, and sure enough, they played their game. One guy was very enthusiastic. He wanted to know about this. He wanted to know about that. In the store owner, or he was explaining things and being very good about explaining this and explaining that. The other guy actually stole speakers. He had a big winter coat, and he'd walk out of the store with this big square belly, walk out and drop one off and go in and get the other one with a big square belly. And I thought, oh my God, this is so stupid, right? But he got away with it, and I was laughing because this guy had a big square belly. I watched another guy steal stuff in the liquor store. And what he did is he bought one bottle. He was going around, and he had a big winter coat, and he had sleeves in it. And he was putting the bottles inside the sleeves, and he filled up his coat, and he'd buy one bottle of liquor, and he'd walk out of there with about 10 of them. And he's just sagging, clank, 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 clank. But nobody noticed. I don't know why.
Yeah. I've seen incidents of people with, special pockets in their coat. And hey, it's the middle of July, and you're walking in with a massive winter coat. Yeah, I believe that.
Yep. And there's other guys who, when the cigarettes used to be in the pump your own gas, self-serve gas station, you used to have to walk into the kiosk. They'd have the cigarettes right there, so the attendant could just get one and sell it to the guys. Well, I saw one guy he's pretty quick. He'd go in there and he'd say something, and the guy would look down, and he'd take a couple packs right quick like that. Nobody noticed, but I watched him do it. So there's all kinds of shoplifting, and make no mistake, that makes everything cost more for us.
Yeah.
The more shoplifting that goes on, the more the prices go up. They have to have security. I must look scruffy sometimes, because I remember going into picking up a shop, a store detective kind of thing. They followed me around, and they had 3 of them in one store that I was in. So I wanted to see how many of the shoplifter security there were in there, like pretending to be shoppers. So I went to a remote part of the store where nobody usually went, buying, so I took my cart and I went way over there, and I just all these 3 people followed me there, and all were looking at stuff that they were unlikely to buy, because in that particular corner, you'd have to have a purpose for going there. It's like automotive stuff. And so you got 3 women there looking at oil filters. Yeah, well, I don't think so.
Yeah. And the oil filter isn't what goes missing, is it?
No, so I thought, and then I moved on to another part, and they followed me there too. So
Yeah.
I they don't even know how to pick. And I knew a millwright guy. I walked into Sobeys late one night, and there he is. He doesn't even live there. He lives in Oakville, and he's pushing around a cart. And I said, hey, he says, what are you doing here? And then I realized, and he's got sunglasses on at night with a cart full of stuff, or partly full of stuff, kind of push. I watched him for a while before I talked to him, and he just wasn't doing a whole lot of anything. He was just watching other people shop. And then I says, what are you doing here? And I realized that he was moonlighting as a store dick.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So he was watching other people. Yeah, get you.
My point with this is they have to hire staff to do that. So they have to hire people to check for shoplifters. That's money, right?
Okay. So Betty's basically saying coffee was nice to get, nice today, guys. Thank you. I had an interesting morning in here. To the ones who were so quiet, hugs, etc.
Thanks, Betty.
All right. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and really, realistically, as the way I look at it is like, and they're probably back on the streets in 3 hours, right?
Yeah, fortunately. But if
And
they keep these things going and start building up a record on them, there might be some
yeah,
consequence.
that's what they need to do is basically build a record on them. I'd prefer, even if they kept them overnight, hey, keep them overnight, inconvenience them,
Yeah. Well, I think there was one woman shoplifter that was the worst. It says something in yeah. So here, well, just like you said, in all, the operation resulted in 51 arrests, 48 criminal charges being laid. In 13 of the incidents, arrested individuals were cleared under a lesser statute. Because it's easier to get them some lesser thing. $14,000 worth of stolen merchandise. Only $7,000 of it was returned in a resaleable condition. And I think they say something like one woman says, police in order jurisdictions. Okay. Two numbers, single, can largely be attributed to a single suspect who is allegedly to have involved in a coordinated shoplifting scheme across the province. So there's real pros out there doing this. So they'll go from town to town. So the shoplift here and there and everywhere. It's hard to keep up on those ones that move around from place to place, because as soon as they're identified or suspected, then they're not around anymore, and they get forgotten, and they show up again a couple months later. So it's hard to keep track.
Some of these professional gangs, what they're doing is targeting a particular area, and moving on in hours.
Yeah, so they're good. They're very good at what they do. I saw a guy in the Future Shop, a girl on a guy team. So he had something, and what he did, how there's a zone, if you walk through it, it beeps if you don't have something where they took off the magnetic strip on it. What he did is he went and he tossed it over the range of the sensor to his girlfriend, and then he walked through. But somebody took off after them because they saw it. His mistake was he didn't look to his right. He looked to his left and saw that nobody was watching, and he threw it over to his girlfriend and over the sensor, and then ran out. So the thing didn't beep, but somebody saw him from his right. So he didn't check to see nobody was watching him in all places. That's the reason why he got caught. Otherwise, he would have got away with it.
Yeah. And presumably they didn't catch the girlfriend.
No, they didn't catch either one of them. They took off, and store security people could only go so far.
Yeah.
And
yeah. And, you know, and basically it isn't a victimless crime. Let's be very honest and blunt about this. It's not a victimless crime. We pay because we pay more for the goods that we, you know, it's quite apart from inflation, we're paying more for the goods that we would otherwise not.
Sure, the store's not going to take anything out of their profits.
Yeah.
Are they? They're going to make the same amount of profit. If they're making $1 million a month and then suddenly a bunch of stuff is stolen, they'll just jack up the price so that they still make $1 million a month.
Yeah, exactly. If they make $1 million a month and there's $50,000 worth of, you know, of stolen goods, they have to jack up the price to accommodate for that $50,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're the ones that pay.
Yeah, absolutely. We do all the time, every time.
Yes. So I advise everybody, if you see a shoplifter, tackle them, put them in a headlock, and call over security.
Call the security, I would say. The trouble is actually there are some stores that operate a policy of we don't worry about it. We've got insurance on that. I'm not sure it's a good thing.
I'm not so sure because the insurance companies don't like that. Insurance companies do not like to pay out. Yeah. And if you're not, what they'll do is they'll say you're going to have to improve your security. And what happens too is stores in the United States, unfortunately, stores that are essential to a community, like a grocery store or other kinds of stores like Walmart in a community, and they get mobbed with shoplifters, the Walmart or Costco or whoever will pull their store out of that neighborhood. That leaves the neighborhood without essential services for clothing, food, whatever they have.
I've heard that with a few American stores, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's happened in a lot of American. That's enough. They said that we're going to have to, and then you get the community people saying, "Wait a minute, we need that store," and the store owner saying, "Well, we can't function here because the people in this neighborhood there's too many shoplifters."
Yeah, there was an incident about that not so long ago, I think in Cleveland, Ohio. Well, it's commented upon in social media. They basically pulled this out, and it was the only store in this relatively poor neighborhood.
Yeah, and that's the problem. You're more likely to get shoplifters in poor neighborhoods, and yet the store needs to be there to service the poor neighborhood. So it's kind of like the contradiction there, you know. They need the store, but you know, because of so much shoplifting, and there it gets quite violent. They have mobs, you know, coming into the store and stealing as much as they can and running out. And there's no way of stopping it. If you get like 20, 30 guys running into a store and taking everything and running through this, no amount of security the police can't get there fast enough. So what are you going to do as a store? You get mobbed like that a couple of times. You got swarmed by shoplifters who just run in, take as much as they can, and barrel their way back out. And any of the security people, what are they going to do? Shoot them? No, they're not going to shoot them for that. But
no,
they can't stop them, and the police can't show up in time. So what happens? The store closes.
Oh yeah, and that's sad for everybody. All right, I think we're going to have to leave it there.
Without further ado, I bid you adieu.